Bus Project was started with some of these ideas in mind 8 years ago now. I was younger and better looking. And you laughed a little bit too hard for my taste.
I was going to say that.
And where we took where we took a handful of four background needs. One was what I was just talking about, a need for kind of public interest energy. Second was a need to get my then generation more engaged in the political process. A third was to reach out beyond kind of the many of the traditional political structures, whether urban, rural, or Democrat, Republican, or you just try to reach out a little bit. And the fourth was to do grassroots stuff, face-to-face stuff, which now has had data to demonstrate it's the most effective kind of politics there are. Right? Person to person, relationship by relationship, more time consuming. Okay, it takes energy, takes persistence. Most effective there is. Better than mail, better than TV, better than auto dials. They actually did a study so I'm not just opining. Yale did a study, Green and Gerber, studying voter turnout, and they tested paid phone banks, the kind of people that try to sell you Week in Las Vegas with a script, and that increased voter turnout between 0 and negative 0.3%. Then they tried volunteer phone banks, right? People like us calling up without a script. And the thing wasn't volunteer paid, frankly. It was genuine versus not genuine, sort of not scripted versus scripted. That increased voter turnout between 2 and 5%. And then they tried actually knocking on doors and talking to voters. And that increased voter turnout between 7 and 12%, right? Which is a big number. Most elections we pay attention to are decided by less than 7 to 12%. So with those things in mind, we figured, well, what should we do? Well, let's buy a bus. Because why not? That seems like a thing to do. And we filled it with crazed loons and took it to the closest.
If you're not on the bus, you're off the bus.
There you go. Although it wasn't required to do drugs on our bus. I learned later about that particular phrase. But I pretended it was intentional. Everything else. Ken Kesey was our inspiration. In fact, the very first article about the bus, I think that's right, was the headline was "Further the Cause," FURTHER, which was the name of Ken Kesey's bus. And I swear to you, just to show how lame I am, if I have to put any airs of think I'm a cool guy or anything other than just catastrophically lame, I desperately thought for weeks it was a typo. I just thought, how could this newspaper possibly, right? Further with a UR at the end, it was Ken Kesey's bus, and you had to you had to be on the bus, meaning and persuaded if you were going to be in the vehicle. So. And we took it to the closest legislative races we could find, clean cut, and figured if we could knock on some number of thousand doors in these closest legislative races, we could impact the Oregon legislature. And we did some math, and it turned out that after a bill like Petolius, for instance, it's not that bill goes down let me assure you another thing. If Democrats are in charge, everything ain't rosy, but I assure you they're much better. So much better. So if you bring a Petolius bill when they're in charge, it just doesn't get a hearing, right? Doesn't have a chance. Barely got it through in the last session, but it doesn't even have a chance under other circumstances. So we looked at the 2002 election, and although it was a 35-25 Republican and Democratic split, right, pretty big margin, almost as big as the margin that the Democrats now have. That it would have been flipped. It would have gone 31-29 the other way, with 1,200 votes turned. That's how close these legislative races are. Right? Not all of them are that close, but there are 5 or 6 races that are decided by a few hundred votes apiece. Jeff Barker won by 40 votes. He was the 31st vote to make the 31-29 majority in the last legislative session. We knocked on 3,000 or 4,000 doors in his district. Every person who came with us knocked on more than 40 doors in a single day. Each of those kids can say, "Hey, look, Ma, I changed history," and they're a little bit right. So we've done about 250,000 doors. We started out, we started out with a guy with a high-ranking political operative telling us that we were crazy and that volunteerism was dead. We're probably right about the first piece, but the second piece we were darn sure we wanted to prove him false. So. Our plan was to go on 10 or 12 bus trips, knock on about 30,000 doors. We didn't do that. We went on about 14 trips, knocked on nearly 70,000 doors, did nearly 100,000 in 2004, focused on the state Senate, focused on 10 state Senate races, looked around and 9 of them had won. In 2006, focused on the state House, again, sort of mostly coincidentally, focused again on 10 races. This time, due to fluke and nationwide Democratic tide, which we hadn't had before, again, won 9 out of those 10, or helped win 9 out of those 10 races. And we're a piece of kind of moving, as I would argue the OCV and others were, of moving the political power equation in the state significantly. And since then, it built a nonpartisan wing that does nonpartisan voter registration. Has registered about 60,000 voters now. Have started outposts that have kind of spun off in Colorado, Montana, and Washington, and maybe coming soon in Idaho and Texas and other places, and also Cameroon, actually. The true story. Women came. I got an email on Thanksgiving from women through the World Affairs Council who had come in their visiting dignitary series, and she had this. Cameroon, they speak, I now know, French in Cameroon, so still impressive, relatively impressive English given that. About how they had come to tour our operation, how impressed she was, and they started to get on the bus project in Cameroon to engage women and young voters in Cameroon. So that's sort of interesting. So that's sort of the story of the bus. The lesson for me has been, well, maybe lots of things. Some of it's just sort of the mechanics of if you put ore to water, what are some of the things we got to make sure we do? And a lot of it is just absolute commitment and never giving up. I mean, that's as important as anything else. It's important to do. Very similar to starting a business or something else. You just need real commitment, and but also at how important it is to build public interest power. That now I now appreciate the work of the bus more than I'm in the legislature than I did before, because I realized because I was getting spoiled, because I was having conversations with people who are asking the question, well, what's the best thing for us to do? How's the state going to be better? Right? What's the best policy idea? This is not the question that most people ask, who are engaged deeply in the process, who are lobbyists paid to achieve results. They are not asking, it's not that they're bad people, it's that they have the wrong job. And we don't have nearly enough people with the right job. And they're outgunned and outflanked. And this is why the OCD is so important, and why what you guys are doing is so important.